practice right for you. My name is Dr. Frank Corbo, and I'm so glad to be on this call for many reasons. I was contacted by Dr. Jonathan Walker via text. Dr. John was bit by the strep bug, and he has laryngitis, and he would ask me if I would substitute in for him on today's call, and I was absolutely delighted. Dr. Mark Sanna, the guest speaker on today's call, is one of my dearest friends in our chiropractic industry, and so it's an absolute pleasure to be on this call with Dr. Mark and with the rest of you. Now, again, today's title is Multidisciplinary Practice Right for You? And, you know, although you might think from the title that perhaps in some way, you know, that chiropractic would be minimized in this multidisciplinary model, let me just say this: nothing could be further from the truth. Not only do I know Dr. Mark personally, but for many, many years, but Dr. Mark bleeds for the chiropractic profession. His DNA is in chiropractic. His father has been a chiropractor for over 50 years, actually close to 60 years, and I believe Mark's been in practice now for over 30 years. Not only that, but Dr. Mark's involvement in the leadership of the chiropractic profession has just been absolutely extraordinary. He's been involved in just about every level and layer of leadership. He's a fellow of the International College of Chiropractors. He's a member of the ACA Governor's Advisory Cabinet, a Foundation for Chiropractic Progress board member, a Finance Committee chairman for the Chiropractic Summit, an NCLAF board member, and of course the CEO of Breakthrough Chiropractic Coaching. Now, again, knowing Dr. Mark and what he has in store for today, I couldn't be more delighted. A couple of groundkeeping rules. Number one is you've got a control panel, typically to the right-hand side of your screen up top. And on that control panel, it has an area where you can hit a raise your hand button. That is to ask a question. And if you wouldn't mind, you can, if Dr. Mark asks you to raise your hand, if he's just trying to see if you're following along, he'll ask you to hit that button. Secondarily, if you have a question that you would like Dr. Mark to address at the end of the webinar, please simply type that in the message box. I will get those questions, and then Dr. Mark will be answering as many as time allows at the end of today's webinar. So with that, I'm pleased to introduce one of my great friends, Dr. Mark Sanna, and take it away, Mark.
Well, thank you, Frank. What a treat to be able to have you here. I certainly miss not having Jonathan with us. So, Jonathan, get better fast, get well fast, and thanks for all you do for chiropractors. Today's message is one that is super timely. We are talking to you here. I'm in the state of Florida. And over the last month in Florida have been some really devastating changes in the rules for PIP insurance, auto accident insurance. In fact, in the past, Floridian chiropractors had $10,000 in benefits, and that was pretty much without question. A couple of months back, our Governor Scott decided with the wave of a pen to take that away, and now the PIP benefits are about $2,400. It's a tremendous game changer for the state of Florida. As you can imagine, there are a lot of docs who built their practices on personal injury work, but what I've heard more and more and more is that, you know, Dr. Sanna, I only did about 20–25% PI in my practice, but it represented 60 to 70% of my income. How am I going to replace that income? So one of the things that we're going to address today are the benefits of multidisciplinary practice in creating a strong, sound business model for your practice. I've been doing multidisciplinary practice for over 20 years now. And it's interesting, when I first began with multidisciplinary practice, it was kind of an outlier. Very few practices were multidisciplinary. Medical doctors and chiropractors didn't play very well together. I can remember Dad and I visiting our local hospital, and they were really upset that chiropractors were even there. So there wasn't any type of inclusion in grand rounds or how we now have residencies at the VA through New York Chiropractic College. I read in Dynamic Chiropractic this morning. Things have changed tremendously. And my goal in this presentation is, A, teach you a little bit about what multidisciplinary practice is, teach you what it's not, teach you some of the things that you absolutely must do to become a multidisciplinary practice, and also some of the things you cannot do as a multidisciplinary practice. So how about we get started? We'll get right into our presentation. And one of the things that I'm most proud of, having been involved with multidisciplinary practice now, as I said, over 20 years, is that when the American Chiropractic Association sat down to draft their multidisciplinary policy statement, I was invited, the only consultant invited on that panel, a panel of attorneys, panel of the leadership of the ACA. We sat down, this was back in 2005, and drafted the multidisciplinary policy statement for the chiropractic profession. You can download that right from the ACA's website. It was, at its time, the very first policy statement that addressed multidisciplinary practice. And inside of this document are the core policies and procedures of Breakthrough Coaching's multidisciplinary practice program. So I'm very proud to say that what exists in that policy statement is exactly what we teach our multidisciplinary practitioners to do. So the decision to build a multidisciplinary practice, it's not for everybody. It certainly is for a doc who is interested in taking their practice to the next level. Dr. Corbo mentioned, gee, is that going to tarnish or diminish my chiropractic philosophy in any way? And I'm sure that by the time we get to the end of this presentation, you'll see that it absolutely does not do that. In fact, it actually strengthens the chiropractic philosophy, and I'll teach you why and how that happens. It may sound sort of a strange thing right up front to be thinking about as how can having a medical doctor in my chiropractic practice that's based on health and wellness, how can that actually strengthen my chiropractic philosophy? Well, the answer might surprise you. So how do you get started? Well, requires a few preliminary steps, certainly recruiting the right medical personnel, and also creation of the right corporate structure. And this is very, very important. The corporate structure is very important because it varies from state to state. In some states, chiropractic and medical licenses have complete parity. For example, here in the state of Florida, a chiropractor can employ a medical doctor, and that's all that it takes. In other states, it requires a corporate structure in which ownership is shared in some percentages by chiropractor and medical doctor. In other states, it requires a dual corporate structure, a management structure that is set up in the name of the chiropractor, and then a medical corporate structure that is run by the medical doctor, because in those states, for example, New York, California, the only individual who can make a medical be involved in the medical decision-making process is an MD. In those states, excuse me, in those states, an MD can hire a DC, but a DC cannot hire an MD. So first and foremost, you want to make sure that you're not trying to wing this, do it out of a box, just think that you can maybe borrow some corporate documents from a buddy in another state, or maybe even in your state, and set up a properly structured multidisciplinary practice. It really requires a level of expertise. So Breakthrough Coaching, our commitment, be conservative, black and white, no gray zone. As you've probably seen, if you read any of the chiropractic literature and journals and newspapers, There are lots of pitfalls when multidisciplinary practice is not done ethically, legally, correctly, with the right intention. And operating a multidisciplinary practice can be very financially rewarding, but those financial benefits can be very short-term if you don't cross all of the T's and dot all of the I's. We want to make sure that you adhere to the most stringent policies and procedures. Multidisciplinary practice is not a legal sleight of hand. It's not a method to sprinkle a little wiffle dust or wave a magic wand over a chiropractic practice, a few sleights of hand, and all of a sudden it's a multidisciplinary practice. It's also not simply a way to increase reimbursement revenues by misrepresenting chiropractic services as medical services. And it's not a method of fraudulently obtaining insurance coverage for chiropractic treatment that would otherwise not be covered. Let me tell you what a multidisciplinary practice really is. A multidisciplinary practice is about the patient. And I can best express this in a story that happened to me actually over the past 2.5 years. My mom received a misdiagnosis of lupus. And those of you who are listening, so mom is, I'm going to say, early 70s, and the treatment for lupus is massive doses of prednisone. And as you're aware, prednisone is a very powerful steroid which has some devastating side effects. So over a period of approximately a year, I watched my mom literally morph into an unrecognizable person. She swelled up tremendously. She developed fluid on her lungs. She really couldn't get up from a chair and walk across the room. She began to have brittleness in her bones and developed vertebral compression fractures that required surgery to repair. On top of that, the prednisone resulted in an emotional roller coaster. The highs were high and the lows were horrible. It got to the point where I really wasn't sure that my mom was going to be around for much longer. In fact, mom and dad were to travel to Italy. It was their 50th wedding anniversary, and they were going to get married in the same chapel that my grandmother and grandfather got married in Sardinia, and they had to postpone their trip because mom simply couldn't travel. Well, I was able to get them to the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, Florida. And at the Mayo Clinic, they perform a type of care that is called collaborative care. Collaborative care. That means that all of the various professionals, and my mom saw multiple professionals. She saw internists, endocrinologists, orthopedists, neurologists, radiologists. All of these professionals collaborated together, working off the same chart. So everyone was looking at the same blood test, everyone was looking at the same MRI CAT scan results, everyone was looking and talking together. Collaboration with a transparent medical record. That is what saved my mom's life. She didn't have lupus. She didn't have lupus at all. Her original symptoms started with some joint pain, and the doctor gave her Cipro to diminish the joint pain, and she had a reaction to the Cipro, right? An idiopathic reaction that almost killed my mom, and yet it was the collaboration. She received nutrition, chiropractic care, acupuncture, along with the medical diagnosis, and then it took about a year to get her off of the prednisone, because you can't just stop that automatically. That has to slowly be tightened down. And I'm proud and happy to say my mom was just here for Easter, and Dad, and you could not tell by looking at my mom today what she went through. So when I talk about a multidisciplinary practice, I'm talking about providing patients with a level of care that doesn't exist anywhere else except for a Mayo Clinic. Providing a level of care where you actually collaborate, coordinate, co-manage, and team care for the patients in your practice. You see, chiropractors have a very clear scope of practice and a very clear philosophy of practice. That philosophy, excuse me, that philosophy is one in which we understand that health is the normal, natural state of the body, and that there's something that is interfering with the full expression of health, and that by removing that interference, health can then be fully expressed. Now, that certainly is not the medical approach. The medical approach is typically that health is a result of some sort of a disease process that requires intervention, not removal, but intervention in terms of drugs or surgery. And while that in certain cases is important, to have both perspectives but with the right intent ends up delivering an extraordinary level of care. So as you place your patients on the type of chiropractic care that increases their potential, increases their performance, increases the level of homeostasis within their system, they are actually able to decrease the level of drugs that are in their bodies. And let me tell you, guys and gals listening, most of your patients are taking something. If it's not Zoloft, it's Ambien to sleep at night, or it may just be doses of Advil that would make your hair stand up straight on your head. They're taking Lipitor. They're taking all sorts of things. In the multidisciplinary model of breakthrough coaching, the role of the medical physician is not to work with a prescription pad to put patients on drugs, but to work with a prescription pad to remove patients from drugs. Take them off of that. That's the type of a medical physician that we want to have in this multidisciplinary practice. Focused on the patient. Focused on the patient in that in the Mayo Clinic, Mom got to see all of these specialists in one location. Was that more convenient? Boy, howdy, was it more convenient. Was it more cost-effective? Completely more cost-effective than when she was seeing one doctor on one side of town, another doctor on the other side of town, and no one was talking to each other. Your patients need you to respect their time. They're busy. They have lots of choices of places to go. When they can come to you and get the kind of care that you would want to receive if something was going on with your body. That's how I build the multidisciplinary practices, and our coaches do in breakthrough coaching. We build the type of practice that we would want our mothers to go to in case something happened to them. You can be that for your community. So let me talk about some of the paradigms that are out there in practice today. You're probably familiar with the chiropractic-only practice. The solo DC practice has a lot of pluses. One of the minuses is they can tend to have a cure-all attitude, and because of that, they don't refer out to their medical counterparts. A lot of times that's for good reason, because when we have referred to an external MD in the past, what happens? Sometimes we lose control of the case. Sometimes they take the patient. Sometimes the patient never comes back. And so it puts us into a disadvantaged position, whereas medical physicians refer everything. By the way, you know what they refer especially is exactly what you do the most: headaches, back pain, you're unfortunately labeled as a back pain specialist. Guess what? Medical doctors, they have no idea what to do with back pain. And there's all sorts of studies now that have come out showing that a course of conservative chiropractic care should precede every surgical procedure because our results are so far superior. Our patients love us. Your patients love you. Survey after survey, we come out at 94, 95% patient satisfaction. I'm not sure I've gone out to dinner with a group of people where 95% of them were satisfied with everything served at the meal. Problem is, after all of these hundreds of years in chiropractic, we're still only scratching 10%. 10% on a good day see a chiropractor. 90% of the population doesn't go to a chiropractor at all. They don't think about you. They don't think bad about you. You're not even on the radar screen for them. So we have been fighting and scraping and scrapping to try and get our piece of the 10%, it's probably about 8% right now, to scrape and scrap and chop that up and slice it and dice it when the whole world of the 90% of the population is out there for us. Another paradigm, and it's a highly popular paradigm, 90% of the people go to a medical doctor, and that's the medical-only practice. And while we focus on the patients first, the medical doctor focuses on the charts and the tests. They look at the chart and they diagnose off the chart. In fact, they're trying to get a little bit better about maybe touching the patients now and then, but that is the medical mindset. Drugs, drugs, and more drugs. They are overwhelmed by managed care. You think you're having a hard time with managed care. Medical physicians are absolutely overwhelmed by the volume that they must see in order to maintain the lifestyle that they've created. You know, medical doctors typically became medical doctors. Yeah, they wanted to help people, but there was also a great opportunity for income there. I'm sure if the income opportunity wasn't as good as it was, maybe they wouldn't have been medical doctors in the first place. But they've seen that go down and down and down and down. In fact, one MedHealth survey that came out last month actually said that less than 27% of medical doctors would recommend that their son or daughter become a medical doctor in the future as a career. Amazing amount, a lack of career satisfaction. And of course, they're focusing on crisis care. Everything is a crisis, whereas our focus, certainly we do acute care, but our focus is on a lifetime of health and wellness for our patients. Well, the third paradigm is the wellness-based multidisciplinary practice. You may call it an integrated practice. Integrated meaning that it's a collaborative practice that has a team approach to care. Patients see all the providers. It blends the best of both worlds into a very unique model. When this is done properly, you can focus on the patient and create lifetime wellness patients. It's about creating a place where your patients can go as a resource to get the right information about their health that they're certainly not going to get anywhere else except in this type of a practice. So, building the practice, well, we require that our member practices meet professional staffing requirements. That may include chiropractors, licensed physical therapists, medical physicians, doctors of osteopathy, physician extenders such as nurse practitioners and physician assistants. So there are significant staffing requirements. Let me talk a little bit about some of the things that are the no-nos in a multidisciplinary practice. And you know what, it always goes back to me to just plain common sense. The rule of common sense is this, that if it doesn't happen out in the real world, what I mean is that outside of the walls of your multidisciplinary practice, if a procedure doesn't exist anywhere else in the world, then there's no way it should exist in your multidisciplinary practice. The sniff test, the smell test, if it smells bad, guess what? It probably is bad. Pretty great rule of thumb with multidisciplinary practice. So here's one big no-no. Chiropractic services, and those are the services performed by the chiropractor, are never billed incident to a medical physician's provider number. What do I mean by that? Is you don't bury the chiropractic service and bill it out under the medical doctor's license as medical care in order to capture benefits after chiropractic benefits are exhausted. That is not ever to happen. Nowhere in the world does a chiropractor have to work and bill underneath a medical doctor. All the services that a chiropractor performs are billed under the chiropractor's provider number. Same thing with PT. PT services have to be performed by a licensed physical therapist or by a PTA, under direct supervision of an LPT. It requires a current prescription for physical therapy written by the medical physician before any services are performed. So that's super important. If physical therapy is performed by a licensed PT, it can be billed incident to a medical provider's number. If it is, then all notes and documentation must clearly display that a PT and not an MD provided the service. I have seen multidisciplinary practices that have chiropractors working in them that you would have no idea that there was chiropractic in the house. That the signage doesn't mention chiropractic, the patient doesn't get adjusted. That is not what a breakthrough coaching multidisciplinary practice is all about. Again, chiropractic services are never billed incident to that medical doctor's license. So let's talk about some of the things you should do. We're talking, when we say multidisciplinary practice, we are talking about legal compliance. This is the corporate practice of medicine. The corporations are involved, and there are very strict state-by-state guidelines for how that occurs. And we aren't, Breakthrough Coaching is not an attorney. We have a great legal team. I typically refer to the NACA, N-A-C-A, that's the National Association of Chiropractic Attorneys. Those are the guys and gals, the attorneys who represent your state associations, also some of our national associations. You want an attorney who understands healthcare law A and understands the subset of healthcare law, which is multidisciplinary practice. So this is one of the areas that is extremely important. What we do, kind of fixing broken multidisciplinary practices. And gosh, I can remember going into states and they were set up according to laws of another state because the attorney was in that state and just figured, well, everybody should have the same corporate documents. And that is so far from the truth. So you want to make sure you have local legal counsel who's familiar with your state, will help work with that legal counsel step by step to make sure that they're drafting the proper agreements. But it's not the time you want your brother-in-law Bernie, who's a divorce attorney or real estate attorney, to put your papers together that you borrowed from a buddy. Your corporate documents are only as good as the legal counsel that created them, because that's going to be the guy who would have to defend them should that ever come up. Here's another no. We kiddingly call it ghost owning doctors. Kind of get the message like they're not really there. And we have a very strict policy in Breakthrough Coaching against ghost or on-paper only physician ownership. So what I mean by that, there are certain states, as I mentioned, where an MD has to own all or part of the stock of the professional corporation or professional association. That owning doc must have a documented, ongoing, and bona fide role in the practice. This isn't just where you get some guy who's never been in the practice, who has no oversight responsibilities of the practice, and acts as a rubber stamp and just kind of holds the corporate paper. That doesn't fly. Again, it doesn't pass the sniff test. If it looks like this thing was set up just as a sham, guess what? It's a sham. So this doc has to have a bona fide role in the practice, and he also has to make a financial contribution to that corporation. There's no corporation in the world that you can form if the principals don't make a financial contribution. So all of the rules of corporate governance for any other corporation that you may have owned or heard about, including filing corporate minutes, having an annual meeting, all of those things that occur in any corporation, guess what? Just because it's multidisciplinary practice doesn't mean, and it's healthcare, doesn't mean that those things don't apply. It applies across the board just as it would for any other corporation. Here's another one, we term this blended billing. That's where you put everything in the blender, spin it out, and it all comes out medical. You heard me say this one a couple of times before. It's that important for me to repeat it. So here's the rule. The provider that performs the service is a provider that's identified on the claim form. So chiropractic services never billed under an MD. All chiropractic services billed under the DC's provider number. Medical and PT services are identified as medical and PT services on the insurance claim. Little word about Medicare, federal health insurance programs. Can you do them in a multidisciplinary practice? Certainly you can. It requires meeting something called the 75% rule. It's a federal staffing requirement, and it has to do with determining the number of practicing hours of the medical supervising physician. It can be complicated if the doc has other practices outside. Rule of thumb is that if the if we're going to bill Medicare, that medical physician or PA is on site when those services are being performed, number one, and number two, it's good practical procedure to have that individual on site for all of your practicing hours. And you'll always meet the 75% rule that way. Standing orders. Oh my goodness. You guys are like getting a history of all the stuff that people did in the past, thought they could get away with, and some of them took long-term vacations in what my Italian relatives call the big house, if you know what that means. It's where you get to wear the orange jumpsuits. Standing orders are when services are billed under the medical physicians. Now, you can't make this stuff up, okay? Standing orders are when a service is billed under the medical physician's provider number prior to the MD examining the patient, writing a diagnosis, and ordering care. Where in the world would that ever occur? Nowhere. Doesn't happen anywhere. So there's no such thing as a standing order. Medical doctor says, oh, you can process the patient under my license even though I'm not there. Here's what you normally do, and you do this intake, and that's fine. You can bill it under my number even though I'm not there. Not. Stop. So multidisciplinary practice should definitely have a strict policy against standing orders. Diagnostic testing. And in a multidisciplinary practice, you have expanded capabilities to do diagnostic tests. There's a whole set of rules that govern the proper delivery of diagnostic testing services within a practice and outside of a practice. If you outsource them, if you have an independent company come in, they're called the Stark regulations. You probably know them best about called the no self-referral, no kickback, right? No patient brokering, all those sorts of anti-fraud type of procedures. So you want to be extremely sure that if you're doing diagnostic testing, either these are individuals who are employed by your W-2 employees of your corporation, And if you have an outside service coming in, it's a complete violation of the Stark regulations to pay for equipment or technicians on a per test or volume basis. Another great tip is if you have a medical physician and you're having x-rays read from a medical perspective, so you obviously are going to look at them from a chiropractic structural perspective, but if you're having them done by a medical perspective, not all MDs, certainly not all primary care docs, don't know how to read x-rays. So you can make a relationship with a radiologist in your area, a referral relationship in which you have your films overread by a medical radiologist for the medical component, and your docs appreciate that. So a multidisciplinary practice can grow through several phases. Typically, it will begin with developing this collaborative care case management system where we're all working together. That would be primarily procedures such as office visits, exams, re-exams. Medical doctor would certify the patient for rehab, write the script for PT in the practice, etc. Once you have that basic structure in place, you can then move on to what I call a more procedure-based multidisciplinary practice. So when the medical doctor moves from just an examining role, right, into actually performing procedures. Right now, some of the options that are available to increase the procedures that are performed by your medical physician are medical pain management, and that's typically trigger point injections, pain blocks, nerve blocks, etc. You can do some primary care. Recommendation is not to do urgent care, but primary care. Medically supervised weight loss, huge, huge, huge market. Allergy testing, aesthetic medicine, and then longevity medicine. There's a big, big market for the baby boomers to do some longevity medicine. So here's another no-no, no bouncing, like my kangaroo. So patients may not receive care under more than one tax ID number in which an owning physician has a financial interest. So, in other words, if your multidisciplinary practice has a medical doctor who works outside the practice, right, he cannot refer into your multidisciplinary practice if he has an ownership interest. Likewise, you're not going to keep your chiropractic tax ID number separate and your medical tax ID number separate. No, we're going to form a new corporation, one tax ID, single group practice, working under a single tax ID number, identifying the individual services performed by provider number of the practitioner. Here's another one, our cute little twins, no duplication. No duplication of services should occur by the various professional providers in your MDP. For example, you're not going to do manual therapy 97140 under the chiropractor's provider number and then also do manual therapy 97140 underneath the physical therapist provider number. We call that double dipping. You're going to pick one, and that's the person who's going to deliver those services. You're not going to have therapeutic exercises with the PT and therapeutic exercises with the DC. Very interesting. The role of the chiropractor in the multidisciplinary practice, you get to focus on what you love to do best, and that is adjust patients. You become the adjusting person. You got a PT whose best scope of practice is to do the physical therapy on the patients. MD does a great systems exam, right? I know a lot of our chiropractic brothers and sisters can do a world-class intake exam as well, but it's interesting to have both perspectives, and you know your focus is on the chiropractic, as Frank DiGiacomo used to say. Independent treatment protocol. Here's a big one. This is how we manage collaborative care. So in a multidisciplinary practice, one professional can never be seen to be directing what is services or procedures performed by the other professionals. In other words, chiropractor can't tell a medical doctor what to do, a medical doctor can't tell a chiropractor what to do. Follow me? Well, how we create this collaborative effort is we actually create a treatment protocol, an algorithm for care, a case management flow sheet. All of our professionals sign off on it. They agree that if a patient has certain findings, this is the level of care that we're going to deliver to the patient. A case management flow sheet is one of the key aspects of making a multidisciplinary practice run smoothly, profitably, in an organized and systematic way. When our professionals collaborate together in a team approach to care, following an agreed upon care path, care algorithm, that practice is a hugely successful systems-driven practice. Word about compliance, like any other practice, boy, if you don't have a compliance program in place, doesn't matter if you're MDP or DC solo, you got to have one in place. And that includes designating a compliance officer, doing your own internal baseline compliance audits, and then annual compliance audits. That's the whole point of a compliance program, by the way. When you get audited, cert audit by Medicare or Blue Cross Blue Shield, you can pull out your own internal audits and say, hey, listen, we do this all the time. We're on top of it. And that's a really important thing. Other thing is the fee schedule of your multidisciplinary practice, just like your chiropractic, should be reasonable and customary for your geographic region. So that's really important. So I'll talk about breakthrough coaching, and then I want to give you a couple of real great take-home tips. So what do? Well, we help you find the right medical personnel. We want to make sure that that is a doc who's going to work in our wellness model. In other words, prescription pad set aside, focusing on the patient, and they love it, by the way. Medical doctors, when they work in a chiropractic practice, I don't know if you know how horrible it is to work in a medical practice. Right now, it is, especially a primary care medical practice, it is not a fun place. And I got to tell you what, man, working in a chiropractic practice that's systems driven is so much fun for them. They love it, they love it, they love it. Breakthrough coaching works with your attorney, making sure that we select the appropriate state-specific corporate structure. And then we actually work with each member of your professional staff. That means we work with the medical doctor. We work with the chiropractor, if you have any chiropractic associates. We work with your physical therapist and rehab team. We make sure that everyone is coordinated on the same page. We don't leave anything up to chance. We really hone interprofessional communications. That's between your professionals, DCs, MDs, PTs, so that we are all working together on the same page. Multidisciplinary practice requires a multidisciplinary approach with your accountant, your attorney, your professional staff, your financial planner, so that everyone is on the same page, and we work with each and every one of these individuals for you. We actually advise you on the purchase of supplies and equipment and how you graduate through basic equipment into more procedural equipment if you're going to be doing pain management and need a C-arm or other things like that. We certainly advise on the capitalization needs for changeover, what monthly operating expenses will be required in order to have your practice run smoothly. And then absolutely the administrative, the behind-the-scenes back office protocols for appropriately and properly operating your multidisciplinary practice. We're going to help you with the proper billing and coding procedures for medical and chiropractic and PT. We'll advise on the delegation of responsibilities, job functions. We have fully built out job descriptions, daily routines, checklists for every single position in that multidisciplinary practice. That includes MD, PT, DC, everybody. Each department has proper scripting. And then we're going to help you when it's time and you're ready to transfer patients from the chiropractic-only model to the multidisciplinary model. We'll help you do that in a way that is going to be supportive to the chiropractic practice and most of all supportive to your patients as well. We're going to advise you on marketing and new patient acquisition for that multidisciplinary practice. It's a whole new world, oh my goodness, when you have a multidisciplinary practice. The opportunities for marketing that practice are magnified many, many times compared to a solo chiropractic practice. We're going to help you develop referral relationships with community-based physicians so that they know what you do, you know what they do, and so that they don't think you're coming in and going to take bread out of their pocket, bread out of their mouth, that you're actually going to develop referral relationships just like any other medical practice has. And of course, we're going to help you develop your quality assurance and compliance programs in your practice. So in closing, you know, it's interesting. We're, as I said, in Florida here, we've just lost PIP, and this is not a new thing. This has been coming for a while. I've seen it happen across the country. I saw when Rhode Island lost workers' comp and massive comp practices closed down, when New Jersey lost their PI up there. Here's the big secret. You've got now, if you're in Florida, for example, and you are only seeing 20-25% of your practice as PIP, now you've got to replace 70% of that income. How are you going to do it? So as a practice management consultant, here's the big secret, gang. There are only 3 ways to grow a practice. Only 3. This is not brain science here, right? Brain surgery. In the chiropractic only practice, the first way, you got to get more new patients, number 1. So how do you do that in a chiropractic practice? Well, you've got to get out there and market more to the 10%. You've got to ask for more referrals, get out there, do talks. The 10% who want to hear chiropractic, you've got to get out there and hammer them, and get them to come into your practice. In a multidisciplinary practice, you want more new patients? Now we can market to the 100%. Interesting, at cocktail parties, people line up to talk about seeing their physical therapist, and when they hear that you're a chiropractor, like go, oh, you're a chiropractor, huh? So it's very interesting. You can market, you can tap into that medical referral model that exists all around you in your community. Like oxygen, you're just not tapping into it because they don't think about you. You're a chiropractor. So DC only, you're going to settle for the 10%. You're going to have to work hard to make up 70% of lost income if you're in Florida just on filling up the box with the 10%. A lot easier to market to the 100%. Second way to grow a practice, you got to keep your patients longer. We call it PVA, right? Chiropractic practice, what do you do when the DC benefits run out? Do they run out? Sure they do. Chiropractic benefits run out after $500 or $1,000 or $1,500. What do you do? What happens typically when the benefits run out? The patients run out, right? So you have to become a master at converting patients to cash when their DC benefits run out. That is what you are going to have to do in order to keep the income level that is being thrust upon you by current economic situations. So in a multidisciplinary practice, keep the patients longer. Well, guess what? You not only have chiropractic benefits, you have medical benefits, you have physical therapy benefits. You can also switch patients to cash when insurance runs out, but you've got a much longer runway. The patient has much more available benefit to tap into because you have several professional licenses. This is not like a chiropractic practice and you say, okay, we're going to do higher volume. I'm going to hire an associate, and guess what? You didn't hire another professional license. You hired the same professional license. It's coming out of the same benefits package. When you hire a medical physician or a physical therapist, it's a completely different benefits package. You've hired the ability to have a patient receive care from different professional components rather than just all from one pot. And then the last secret, the way to grow your practice is, so number one, get more new patients. Number two, keep them longer. Number three, you got to increase the income per visit. You got to deliver more services, sell more stuff, and that's hard to do in a chiropractic practice where a lot of times you're capped on what you can charge, you're capped on the number of modalities that you can perform. The only way that you can increase services per visit is to sell cash-based ancillary products and services like orthotics and pillows and belts and nutrition. Those are all certainly things that you can do to increase income per visit. In a multidisciplinary practice, you increase your income per visit by having additional professionals deliver diverse procedures that would not be delivered in your chiropractic practice. However, patients are receiving these very same services in your community. They're just not getting them in your office. Well, let's turn the tables on that, and instead of somebody having to go across town for their medical checkup, how about they come into a place of health and wellness in which they're going to be supported with the type of care you want to give them. So in closing, I want to talk about something called an exit strategy. So if you were an entrepreneur and not a chiropractor, you would think about your practice as a business. And so I'm going to ask you for a moment to take off your chiropractic hat and put on your entrepreneurial hat. Now, when an entrepreneur founds a business, on the very first day they open that business, that entrepreneur is thinking about selling the business. Who am I going to sell it to? What's the target revenue that I need to get it to be able to sell it for a multiple of what I have invested in it? That's how an entrepreneur works. And guess what, gang? You are entrepreneurs. Part of being a chiropractor, you might not like that part of it, but you are an entrepreneur, and your single greatest asset is your chiropractic practice, not your home. It's your chiropractic practice. And here's the tough love. Chiropractic practices today are selling for between 50 and 75 cents on the dollar. So take the revenue, rolling revenue over the last 12 months, figure out how much you made over the last 12 months rolling, you know what I mean? And then multiply that by 50 or 0.5 or 0.75. You'll then get what the value of your practice is. Unfortunately, there's no credit out there right now for young docs to buy a chiropractic practice, especially if you have a successful chiropractic practice. What you've bought for yourself is a lifestyle, but not an exit strategy. And you're often going to be required to hold the note, to keep paper, because that purchaser, all or part, will not be able to finance that purchase. Now that means you've retired from practice, you're 65, 70 years old, you've got some guy in the practice who doesn't have what it takes, the practice starts to crash and burn, you can't, he can't afford to pay the note, and now you're stuck at 60, 75 years old going right back into practice again, and it is not an easy thing to do. And I can tell you, we hear it every single day. We've had so many members in breakthrough coaching where they're like, man, you just got to get me back to where I would have been 5 years ago so that I can get out of this thing. Well, here's the bright news. Multidisciplinary practices regularly sell for a multiple of their earnings. In other words, somewhere between 1.3 and 1.5, sometimes more, the more professionals that are involved. And guess what? You know who can buy that? Not just the chiropractic associate who doesn't have any money, but now the medical doctor can buy that practice. You're now able to market that practice to the people who know the practice, who worked in the practice, and guess what? Who can afford to buy the practice. So I want you to think about it. What will be your exit strategy? when is it? You ought to have a done date. You ought to know what it's going to take to get there. And it's super, super important that you understand how important it is for you to look at your practice as a business. So what I'd like to do at this point in time, Frank, I'm going to let you open up for questions. I'm going to throw my website up here for Breakthrough Coaching just so that folks can take a look at that and hopefully come visit us. There's lots of information and resources. It's mybreakthrough.com. You can see it up on the top of the screen. And we're going to see a series of boxes on the left side of the screen. And those boxes are a guest tour, a free practice analysis, and then a newsletter sign up as well. If you like, we have a series of videos that you can sign up for, the top 10 strategies you must master for success. You can sign up right here, and we'll send you those videos. I think they come out once every 3 weeks, once a month, something like that. Most importantly, though, if you have an interest about multidisciplinary practice, you want to speak to a coach, give us a call. Here's our number right at the top of the screen, 1-800-7-ADVICE. That's 1-800-723-8423. We have folks standing by right now. Give us a call, and we'll make sure that you can speak to somebody who can address anything that you would like to further delve into that we had in this particular session. So, Dr. Corbo, it's all yours.
Well, gosh, Mark, I took copious notes, probably 6 or 7 pages full. And I think the one thing that I want to get across, on behalf of Jonathan and of course on behalf of yourself there, Mark, is everybody needs a most trusted advisor, whether it's your health, whether it's personal, financial, business, relational, spiritual, whatever it is, we need a most trusted advisor. And that advisor has to be able to have demonstrated not only last week, last month, last year, but demonstrated a life of integrity, of honesty, of being ethical, and having the wonderful opportunity and privilege to know personally Mark and Jonathan. Both of those gentlemen fit in that most trusted advisor role. So I would echo those words by Mark. If you're interested and perhaps maybe not yet convinced because there's a couple of missing pieces for you as it relates to moving into an MDP practice, pick up the phone, call Mark, call Mark's team. I know many of his senior coaches. One of his senior coaches, most people know that would be Mike from Louisiana down there. They're tremendous people, tremendous guys. They know what they're doing. They've done it for decades, not weeks, months, or years, but decades. Mark bleeds for the profession, and so I would highly recommend you do that. Secondly, if perhaps you're struggling with your practice, maybe it's not generating as much revenue as you would like. I've worked now with Jonathan Walker at PI Marketing Elite for over a year. And Jonathan is a young guy. He's just over 30, just turned 30 this year, but yet his practice is honestly and ethically generated over $1 million the last 3 years. Now, I repeat, honestly and ethically. And John created PI Marketing Elite for one reason, and that is to help more doctors care for more people in their communities, especially those that are being injured in whiplash accidents. Knowing that chiropractic is an integral part of that, he created PI Marketing Elite to help you to see more people in your community. So the key with both of these gentlemen is they've practiced what they've preached. For Mark, close to 30 years. Jonathan, although he's only 30, he has established a very honest and ethical practice, very successful. And so with PI Marketing Elite, if you would go to that website, pimarketingelite.com, you'll learn all about Dr. John and what he's done. He has many modules basically around clinical, marketing, and done-for-you products and services. If you're interested in learning more, here's one thing you can do. Call Dr. John at 904-616-1284, and he'll walk you through a demo. Take about 15 to 30 minutes, and he'll show you how you can change your life by seeing a few more PI patients each and every month. So just wanted to go over that one more time for Jonathan, who was unable to make the call. Again, Dr. Mark, it's great reconnecting with you. Thank you so much for spending time with us here. If anybody has questions that they didn't get an opportunity to ask, the best place to email would be info@mybreakthrough.com. Again, that's info@mybreakthrough.com. Again, give Dr. Mark and his team a call at 800-7-ADVICE or Dr. Jonathan Walker at 904-616-1284. Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your busy day, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week on another PI Marketing Elite call. Take care and have a great day.
Thank you, Frank. Have a great day.
You betcha. Thank you, Mark. Bye now.